I'm Charlie and today we're going to look at undercover police answer questions you've always wanted to know. But before we get locked up, why not subscribe and press the notification bell too. The first question is, how do you deal with betrayal? One job of undercover police is to develop a relationship with whoever they're investigating. For example, a cop may have to develop a relationship with a gangster, or maybe they're going undercover in a radical gang. If this is the case, then they need to get to know all of the members very well, including the higher ups. But when this happens, there can be some issues. It's been known that undercover cops have spilled the beans about who they really are. They do this because they get so attached to who they're spending time with. And a lot of the time, because undercover cops are spending so much time with the person they're investigating, they develop an affection for them. But eventually they do have to betray this person as they're investigating them for criminal reasons. This means over the months or years they spend time with this person, they're collecting info and betraying them simultaneously. Oftentimes, undercover cops need psychological counseling to deal with this conflict. This not only occurs during the time they're undercover, but also afterwards. They may feel very guilty as the person they kind of saw as a friend is now behind bars. Just imagine you developing a great friendship with someone and all that time you're also thinking you're going to put them in jail. It is an incredible inner turmoil and conflict, and that's why they often need psychological help. Next up is, what if you get uncovered? So what happens in the event of an undercover cop getting exposed somehow? Sometimes they may slip up and get investigated by the mob or the criminals they're investigating themselves. Or sometimes the people they're investigating pay the police and other police rat out on this undercover cop. This can be very dangerous as these cops are undercover with some scary people. In fact, recently there was a case in Texas where an undercover cop was found out and his life was taken. But what actually happens if an undercover cop gets exposed? Well, the first thing they need to do is get out of the situation immediately. They need to go to their local police station and make sure they're safe. They will then likely be held in a prison cell for their own safety or taken to a safe house. During this time, other police will need to swarm in on the network they've built. Because the criminals will now know that they've been spied on, they may try and make a run for it and fly out of the country. This means they need to be apprehended as soon as possible. That is, if the cop can get out of the situation at all. Undercover cops are trained very specifically. They'll have a whole backstory and an explanation for everything, so they may be able to talk their way out of it as they are professional talkers. But really their job is to make sure their safety is paramount and get out of the situation by all means necessary. Next up is, what if you get arrested? Obviously, an undercover cop's true identity is only known to a few people, and that does not include all police. So what if, when they're hanging out with criminals, they end up getting arrested themselves? You may think they would try and say to the cops arresting them, "Wait, I'm a cop too," but that's actually not what they do. Instead, they just play along with it. After all, the cops arresting them likely would not believe them. And also they'd run the risk of the person they're being arrested with finding out their true identity. Instead, they just play along with it and are taken into the jail cell. Then, when they're in an isolated room, they would make it clear to the cops that they need to speak with their lawyer. Their lawyer would actually be a cop and he would come and take him out of jail. But sometimes, in cases when this happens, undercover cops have to spend the night in jail. This would be to avoid arousing suspicion with the criminals they've infiltrated. Criminals may suspect something if they get out of jail so quickly. So that's why they may have to spend a night behind bars. And sometimes they're even punched by fellow cops to give them a black eye to make the impression they're not part of the police. This just shows the extreme dedication undercover cops have. And it also shows their #1 goal, which is to not be uncovered. Next up is, where do you live? Ever wonder where undercover cops live while they're doing their undercover work? Well, spoiler alert, they do not live with their family in their normal homes. First off, this could put them or their family, if they have one, in danger. Instead, when they're undercover, they have a whole different identity. It's kind of like how some actors really get into character and pretend to be that character when they're doing the role. Undercover cops are the same, as they have totally new identities. They get given a gigantic file all about their fake lives. This will have their fake name, backstory, childhood information. their fake graduation details, their fake family details, and they'll also be given a fake undercover house. This will likely be a house nearby to whoever they're spying on, and the place they live will also reflect who they're spying on as well. If they're spying on a bunch of dealers, they'll be given a poor drug's den, but if they're spying on mobsters, then they may be given a high-class house in a fancy area. These houses are pretty well furnished in case any of the people they're spying on come round. The people they're spying on may want to investigate the undercover officer themselves. So that's why they'll have staged photographs of them around their home. Also, if they're hanging out with dealers, they may have substances around their home, even though that's strictly forbidden. Really, none of it's real, and it's all for show in case someone tries to check them out if they suspect they're an undercover cop. Next up is, do you carry police equipment? Some people think that undercover cops are simply regular police who are wearing plain clothes, or maybe grow a beard and wear glasses. But this is a total myth. In a true undercover role, they do not carry any police equipment. This means they won't carry a firearm or a police ID. They won't even carry their own credit cards, they'll get all new ones with their fake name. Also, they're usually stationed in areas where they grew up. This is to save money on more training, but it does invite a lot of risk. Imagine an undercover cop sitting at a bar with a criminal they're talking to trying to get information out of. Then all of a sudden, a former high school classmate of theirs walks up and talks to them with their real name. This obviously would expose them instantly, which is why this is a big risk. That's why they try and become as undercover as possible. They may change their look, such as growing facial hair if they didn't have it already. But they also won't carry any police credentials in case they get checked on the spot by the people they're investigating. And the only weaponry they'll carry is illegal stuff given to them by their criminal friends. Next up is, who do you speak to? If you think an undercover cop simply goes home to their family and hangs out like normal, then you'd be wrong. Being an undercover cop is not a 9-to-5 gig. In fact, it's something you do for amounts of time every now and then, it's not a constant thing. Remember, undercover cops live in houses given to them by the police force. If they have a family, then they have no contact with them whatsoever, as this could put them at risk. But how does an undercover cop contact the police force to give them the information they're collecting? Well, they don't go directly to the police, as this could cause them to get exposed. Instead, they only contact the police force via a handler. This handler will be someone who is specially designated to that undercover cop. The handler will be very unassuming and wear plain clothing. They may not even see the handler and instead do an information drop-off. This will be where the undercover cop drops off things like audio recordings, photographs, and files in a remote location. Then a few hours later, the handler will come by to this predetermined location and pick up the info. Sometimes the undercover cop and handler will never meet face to face. This is to maintain the security of the undercover cop and make sure they don't get exposed. And finally on the list of questions you've always wanted to ask an undercover cop, we have, can you break the law? You may think that undercover cops can break the law, and that's true in some aspects, but not in others. In many ways, undercover cops have to walk a fine line. While working in the role of an undercover cop, they're not supposed to break any crimes. Any crimes they do break have to be approved in advance. That's because it could jeopardize the entire case if they're found to be breaking the law, and the criminal they've investigated could walk free. Also, substance use is strictly prohibited. This is not only because it's against the law, but also because an undercover cop This is not only because it's against the law, but because an undercover cop could become as addicted as anyone else. And also, this could reduce their credibility as a witness and destroy the entire case. However, if it would further the investigation, they can break the law if it's been pre-approved. They would likely need to ask the police force via their handler if they can break a crime if they expect they're about to commit one. Ways to know if the FBI is spying on you. Coming up first, we have business vans. Look outside your window right now and I'm sure you'll see lots of vehicles outside your house. These may be your neighbor's cars parked up or cars driving by. But do you see any vans parked outside your house? One surefire way to know the FBI is watching you is that there's an unmarked white van with tinted windows outside your home. This van may stay there for several days and not go anywhere. You'll also not see anyone go in or out of it. Well, these vans aren't doing nothing, they're actually waiting and listening. It may sound like something from a movie, but these vans are real. They have gigantic listening devices which listen into your phone calls. And if your house is bugged with listening devices and secret cameras, they may be watching you and listening to your every move. Now, a lot of the time, these will be unmarked white vans. But more often than that, they're actually going to be fake commercial vans. It may be a flower delivery service or some kind of business van, but really these businesses don't exist and they're a front for an FBI spying investigation. One man from California named John Lang was known for exposing corrupt cops. He saw one cleaning van keep parking up outside his house and caught it on security footage. A few days later, John was found to be not alive in his house. And when people looked into the cleaning company on the side of the van later on, they found out the company did not exist. Many now say the cops, or maybe the FBI, had something to do with the mystery of John Lang. Next up is outfit changes. When you're out, do you often see the same people all around you? You may think you're going crazy when that delivery driver suddenly looks a lot like the office worker who passed you in the street. Maybe someone seemed to be rubbernecking you when you were sitting in the local coffee shop. Well, these fears may not be paranoia. One type of an FBI agent is known as an SSG. These people belong to the Special Surveillance Group. They employ various people who keep changing their outfits and follow specific targets. Because they're pros at disguises and changing their outfits, many of the people they're following never know they're being followed. But keep a lookout at the passing faces next time you're in the street. You never know, you could be followed by a lot of people who keep changing their clothing. If you look closely, these people may even have miniature earpieces inside their ears. That's because they're communicating over radio at all times. They'll be tracking the targets and moving from location to location. And of course, they always bring with them a bag of clothing to change into various different disguises. Next up is data usage. Have you noticed data usage on your phone suddenly going up for no reason? Well, if it seems like your charges are going up every month from your phone provider, then that could be a sign that you're being spied on. A common reason people notice a spike in their data is their phone has been infected by spyware. This could allow the FBI to take a look at your daily activities on your phone. Many people don't even realize that spyware exists for phones. You may think only clunky old PCs can get viruses and spyware, but that is not the case. This can also allow them to steal your private information and use it against you later. So if you notice your data going up, then make sure you don't have any spyware installed on your phone. If you do have this, then your movements can also easily be tracked. They can also steal all of your passwords you put into your social media or bank accounts. And of course, all of your phone calls and texts will be recorded. On most phones, you can check into what apps are running in the background. Some of these apps may be infected by spyware, which could be the culprit for the increased usage and data. Next up is namesake. You may be saying, why on earth would I be being spied on if I'm a totally law-abiding person? Well, I'll put it like this. One John Smith may be a good guy, but another John Smith may be a bad guy. What I mean by this is, you may have the same name as someone on a government watch list. Let's say a man named Mark Johnson is on the FBI's spy list. What they may do is target various people named Mark Johnson as a mistake. If you're frequently stopped at the airport, this may be why. For example, people named Mohammed have a higher chance of being stopped at the airport. This is not due to any kind of prejudice, but simply because other people with similar names to them are also on FBI watch lists. Namesakes can often mean innocent people are victims of surveillance and investigations. But if you think you might have the same name as someone on a government watch list, you can apply for a redress process. This is where the FBI check that you're not the person on the watch list and green light you. So if you're tired of being stopped at airport security for no reason, then maybe check this out on the FBI's website. In 2004, a man named John Lewis was on a government watch list. This meant that for years to come, every John Lewis had issues boarding flights because they had the same name. But if you want to check if your name is blocked, then go on the specifically designated Nationals and Blocked Persons list. This is published by the US Treasury, so be sure to check it out online. Next up is car GPS. We've already covered how your movements can be tracked if your phone has spyware. But another common way the FBI tracks people's movements is by using trackers. If you see cars constantly following you, then this could be the FBI stalking your car. The way to see if you're being tracked is to check for a GPS in the undercarriage of your car. These are often very small and can be in the wheel well or the exhaust system as well. So if you're suspicious, grab a flashlight and check under your car. Maybe even run your hand underneath the areas, making sure your car is not too hot to burn yourself. Remember, anyone can buy these trackers online now, so if you do find one, it may not necessarily be from the FBI. But it's still something to watch out for, as you do not want your vehicle to be tracked. Next up is noises on phone calls. When you're talking during phone calls, do you ever hear strange noises and clicks during those calls? Maybe you hear some pops and static. Well, if that's the case, then your phone line may be tapped. This is a very classic form of surveillance and is still used a lot today. Using technology, radio frequencies can be used to record your conversations. This will allow the FBI or anyone to hear the sensitive information you're sharing on a private call. So if you hear tapping or maybe some odd noise during your phone conversations, you may be being wiretapped. If you want to test this, then you can go to your phone carrier and ask for a line test. Tapped phones may also sometimes receive alphanumeric text messages. These will appear on your phone as a voicemail, and a series of letters and numbers will be read out. This can be a sign that a government or an amateur may be attempting to tap your cell phone. Next up we have Webcam Light. Take a look at your webcam. Do you see an LED light which is always on? WikiLeaks recently released a lot of files proving the FBI spies on people using electronic devices. And one of the most popular devices used were webcams in computers. The only physical sign that a webcam has been compromised is that the LED light is always on. But apparently the FBI and MI5 have the technology to turn this light on while still spying on you. That's why it's often best to put tape over your webcam camera. Many tech geniuses, for example Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, put tape over their webcam camera. And Edward Snowden says anyone who doesn't put tape over their webcam camera is a crazy person. And finally on the list, we have airport checks. Do you always get flagged up at the airport? Well, if that's the case, then it's a sign your name is on a government watch list. Many people have not been able to board their flights over controversial social media posts. People can't be put on a blacklist for unreliable or non-credible information, but social media posts are not disregarded. And the NSA has the capacity to spy on every American's social media posts and link it to your passport. So sadly, be very careful about what you post online. For example, one British couple were detained at an airport. They were going from the UK to the USA, and the day before they wrote, "We're going to blow up America." This is obviously a common expression, meaning they're going to have a crazy fun time. But that is not how the FBI took this, and they thought they were people who were going to explode a building in the USA. So be careful about that, and if you keep getting stopped at airports, you may be on a blacklist. At the most feared prisoner in the world. Charles Bronson was born Michael Gordon Peterson. He was born on the 6th of December 1952, and that makes him 67 years old today. He's been referred to as the most violent prisoner in Britain and the most notorious man in the UK. Over the 67 years he's been alive, he's been detained at some of the most high-security psychiatric hospitals and prisons. This includes Broadmoor, Ashworth, and Rampton. He began as a petty criminal with armed robbery, but he then began bare-knuckle boxing in East London. It was at this time he changed his name to Charles Bronson, like the American actor. In 1988, he went back to prison for another robbery, but there he was aggressive to many inmates and took some hostage. He made the hostages he took tickle his feet and also play music to him. At this time, the guards realized he was too much to handle, so he was placed in total isolation for many months. During this time, he had no concept of whether it was night or day, as he was kept in total darkness. And he was also not allowed to wear any clothing. When he was finally released, he hit a prisoner named John Henry Gallagher with a glass jug. He was then kicked out of that prison and went to around 4 more prisons in this time. Because he kept getting into trouble, he was switched routinely around 4 prisons. These prisons were Armley, Wakefield, Parkhurst, and Walton. These are some of the most dangerous and scary prisons in the UK. But everywhere he went, the inmates feared him more than anything else. And he was transported from all of these prisons chained to the floor of a prison van. During the time going between these 4 prisons, he began a fitness program, and he even wrote a book which sold thousands of copies. This was called Solitary Fitness because he did all of his fitness in solitary confinement. The book has been reviewed very well with 4 stars, but critics have said it does sometimes get very strange and bizarre at some points. When he was finally settled into a new prison, he attacked 2 guards. And during this time, his wife on the outside had also found a new man. When the divorce papers finally got to Bronson, who was behind bars, he went crazy. He attempted to poison the prisoner in the cell next to him, and that's when he was moved to Parkhurst Prison. During this time, he befriended the Cray twins. He described the Cray twins as the best 2 guys I've ever met. But many know the Cray twins as being part of the Cray gang. They are arguably some of the most dangerous gangsters in British history. Eventually, he almost took the life of a prison officer. So he was put in isolation for 4 months and then moved to yet another prison. After that, he tried to dig his way out of his cell. But another inmate who knew of his escape plan had snitched on him. This caused Bronson to attack that prisoner, scarring him for life. Bronson was then moved to a prison on the Isle of Wight, but there he attacked a prisoner with a jam jar, causing terrible injuries. He also attempted to take his own life and that of a prison officer. Soon he was transferred to Rampton Secure Hospital, which is a hospital for the criminally insane. But there he encountered John White. John White had taken the life of a child. Bronson wanted revenge for this and tried to take John White's life. Bronson said his worst days were in Rampton Secure Hospital. That's because the people in there had done things I can't even say in this video. The people there were also very crazy. They would run headfirst into walls. They would also injure themselves with pens, pins, and scissors. He also saw people blinding themselves and biting their arms, legs, and feet. He was then moved back to Broadmoor, but at Broadmoor he performed a rooftop protest. He climbed to the roof of the prison with many other prisoners. He also tore off many roof tiles and caused nearly $250,000 worth of damage. His rooftop protest went on for 3 days, and he only stopped when he was talked down by his family. Later on, he took up art and began painting. His cartoons have been published in 10 books, and he actually won awards for these cartoons. Later on in prison, he took up bare-knuckle boxing again, and he even bare-knuckle boxed a dog, which he ended up taking out. He said it's something he was not proud of because he loves animals, but he did need the £10,000 he got from doing this. A few years later, he was out of prison, but a few years later, he robbed a jewelry shop to get a ring for his new girlfriend. He was soon arrested and taken to Leicester Prison. While he was there, he tried another prison protest but failed. He was then taken to Brixton Prison, but there he was put into isolation after throwing water at the prison governor. He then was moved to a prison in Durham. There he bonded with a family of rats which had crept into his cell. And later he was moved to Long Lartin Prison. At first he settled in there pretty well, but he later went over the edge and did a nude riot. He also created a spear with a broken bottle and a broom handle. He was then let out for 53 days. But he then tried to rob someone with a sawn-off shotgun and was put back in Woodhill Prison. While he was there, he took a civilian librarian hostage. To let them go, he demanded an inflatable doll, a cup of tea, and a helicopter from the police. But after the librarian broke wind in front of him, he let him go. Bronson then married a woman named Fatima Saria Rehman. Due to his new marriage, he converted to Islam. For a brief time, he changed his name to Charles Ali Ahmed, but then changed back after they broke up. In 2013, he made a petition which was signed by 10,000 people. This was to try and release him from prison. It was sent to then Prime Minister David Cameron, but he rejected it. In 2014, Bronson injured a prison governor in HMP Woodhill, and a year later changed his name to Charles Salvador in tribute to Salvador Dali, his favorite artist. In 2017, he proposed to a famous actress who was on a prison visit. Paula Williamson, who's appeared in Coronation Street and Emmerdale, said Charlie is a changed man. But after Bronson asked Williamson to wear a catsuit next time she visited, she broke up with him. About 1 month later, Williamson was found at her home not alive. So far, the cause is unknown. And that brings us to right now. Charles Bronson is currently incarcerated at Her Majesty's Prison, Woodhill, and it's thought he will be there for life. He's 67 right now, and who knows how long this guy will live. But one thing's for sure, he has lived an amazing and scary life. And I think it's now pretty clear why this man is the most feared prisoner in the world. Inmates reveal the worst things they've seen inside prison. Coming up first, we have Fred West. One Reddit user disclosed that they were once incarcerated in Winston Green Prison in Birmingham, UK. Inside, another inmate was Fred West. But what was strange was how the prison officers got on so well with him. You may think, what's so strange about this? Fred West simply would joke around and the officers would laugh. But the scary thing is what Fred West did. Fred West treated his own daughter terribly. He would do things I can't even say to her. And he also buried his own daughter in concrete. Fred West also tried to injure another girl, but she punched him, causing him to fall 2 floors down a set of stairs. But the prisoner says the disturbing thing was how jovial he was and how the officers treated him like a friend. I suppose behind bars a sense of closeness is inevitable, but it's still very creepy and unsettling. Next up is Pirate. This one is actually a story from a juvenile prison, but it's one of the most chilling stories from behind bars you'll ever hear. One Reddit user was incarcerated inside a juvenile prison. One day at the prison there was a new kid who was very shy and quiet, and unfortunately he was put in a cell with one of the scariest inmates at this juvenile prison. On the second night he was there, his cellmate unscrewed a screw from the bench they slept on. He then sat on the new quiet kid's bed in the middle of the night, and when the new kid woke up, the most dangerous inmate said, "I'ma make you a pirate." He then shoved the screw into the new kid's eye. When the kid was asked why he did this, he said the new kid looked at him the wrong way. I'm not sure whether he really did get an eye patch to look like a pirate, but that is a terrible story. Even though the quiet kid must have done a crime to get in there, still, this is terrible under any circumstance. Next up is electric chair. One prison inmate said the worst thing he saw was someone being electrocuted behind bars. Very few countries in the world have the death penalty, but one of them is the United States, where it happens in 29 different states. However, only 5 still use the electric chair. These states are Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Tennessee. One prisoner actually saw another prisoner be electrocuted. The prisoner's eyes were first taped closed, and the prisoner is often given a diaper in case they have a bodily function. It's supposed to be instantaneous, but some prisoners have been known to scream, and this is what happened in this situation. Sometimes prisoners' heads can even burst into flames, although this is rare. And any burnt off skin must be scraped off the electric chair before it can be used again. Yeah, it's easy to see why this is the worst thing an inmate has seen behind bars. But it's pretty uncommon that these are used, which is why barely any inmates ever get to see it. Next up is Scariest 9-year-old. So this one comes from an ex-guard who used to work at a juvenile detention facility in New Mexico, USA. He said the scariest thing he ever saw was a young boy, 9 years old, enter the center. He was then booked in for taking the life of both of his parents. He said the child didn't even seem human, almost like a monster. The guard said he felt total fear when he looked into the child's eyes. He also said the child was very different to most juvenile inmates. He never broke any rules and always followed all commandments. He also never spoke unless someone spoke to him first. Later on, he was transferred to a mental facility, but the ex-guard said he'll never forget the kid's eyes and it haunts him to this day. Next up is James Holmes. This one isn't scary in the traditional sense, but it is very uncomfortable. One ex-inmate said they once saw James Holmes come into their prison. He's the man who took 12 lives at a cinema in Aurora, Colorado, USA. This happened in 2012 during a midnight screening of the film The Dark Knight Rises. He took the lives of 12 people and injured 70. He said he'd seen the man's face on the news and on TV, but seeing his face in reality was very strange. He said he had no idea what to expect, but it was very disturbing simply to see him in the flesh. Next up is Easter Surprise. One former inmate said one thing a prisoner in his cell block would do is called Easter Surprise. That is, on Easter morning, he would take off all of his clothing. He would then wave a toilet brush around, hopping around trying to avoid the oncoming guards. This was basically a way to really annoy the guards and to ruin their Easter. And if you're thinking that's random and crazy, that's because the people behind bars often are. Next up, we have concrete squash. One ex-convict said he once went into prison for a short while. He was supposed to get given his paperwork saying his charges before he got to prison, but he didn't. This made the other prisoners very suspicious and thought he may be a snitch. All of the other prisoners said they were going to get him, but a friend of this guy was also in prison and he said he had nothing to worry about. But that night, while the guy was making his bed, a few prisoners ran into his friend's cell. They then bounced the guy's head off the concrete, like they were playing concrete squash. We all know squash is the game where you bounce a ball off a wall. Well, that's exactly what they were doing to this guy's head. The person who told this story on Reddit said they could even hear it and were terrified. And that was actually the moment that scared him straight, and he never committed another crime again. Something tells me that wouldn't make it into the TV show though. And finally on the list, we have detox. Did you know that 60% of serious crimes are committed while the person is drunk? That's one of the reasons why if you go to prison, a lot of the people will have a problem with alcohol. Well, one day a former inmate said that they saw a guy detoxing from alcohol. But as this was happening in prison, the person passed away. Alcohol is actually the most dangerous substance to detox from. But the guy said it was a terrible thing to witness in his own cell. The person slowly went totally insane mentally and emotionally. And then they simply closed their eyes and never woke back up. If that doesn't haunt you for the rest of your days, I don't know what will. Secret Service agents answer questions you've always wanted to know. Coming up first, we have assassin interviews. Seeing as the sole job of a Secret Service agent is to make sure the president's safe, an assassination would be the worst thing possible. That's why they take thousands of precautions to make sure this never ever happens. Of course, the USA with a population of over 300 million has some loonies. And some of those people will want to take out the president, as people are very divided when it comes to politics. Did you know that almost every other day there's a threat made against the president's life? And usually it comes in a note form and is sent to the White House. Or sometimes people send a message online, whether it's on email or social media. Well, according to a Secret Service veteran, Tim Wood, this is something they have to look into. It's called protective intelligence, and whenever anyone makes any threat towards the president, they have to investigate that person. In fact, every aspect of that person's life will be investigated without them even knowing. The Secret Service will interview their friends, neighbors, employees, associates, and anyone else involved in their life. The whole thing they're trying to figure out is this person serious? Of course, it's one thing to write something or say you're gonna do something as compared to actually doing it. And that's why they have to check if these people are serious or not. This is a full-time job, so now you know why there's 116 agents in the field as we speak. Did you know that making a threat against the president is a Class E felony? However, sometimes if the people are found to have alcohol problems or mental illnesses, they are spared sentencing and are instead given psychiatric help. Next up is bathroom company. If you value your privacy, then I have a tip for you: don't become the President of the United States. That's because, thanks to the Secret Service, you are never alone, and I mean never. The president has to be protective wherever they go, and this includes the bathroom. Whenever the president goes to a doctor's office or the bathroom or anywhere private, they are joined with the Secret Service. Even during very private medical exams, the Secret Service are standing by. That's because even the doctor could be a threat, so they can never be alone. Next up is blood bags. When the president leaves the White House or goes to a different country or state, there's a humongous entourage. Hundreds or sometimes thousands of people will join him, and gigantic military airplanes will carry things like bags and other items the president may need. But amongst all of that stuff includes many bags of blood. This is blood which is exactly the blood type of the President of the United States. The current president has the rarest blood type in the world, Rh negative blood. Every Secret Service agent is trained in what's known as 10-minute medicine. These are basically medical procedures to keep the president alive before he can get real care from professional doctors. And because of that, in the president's motorcade or in airplanes if they're traveling abroad, they will always have bags of the president's blood. This actually helped save President Ronald Reagan during a 1981 assassination attempt. A bullet did enter his rib, but thankfully they had his blood type and he was saved. Next up is bullet training. Secret Service agents need to protect presidents from assassinations. And so far, every presidential assassination in history has been with a bullet. Due to this, Secret Service agents must be prepared for the worst case scenarios. And that's why in training, they're shot with fake bullets. They undergo very frequent and rigorous training scenario exercises. To make these simulations effective, they're actually shot with marking rounds or plastic bullets. These leave a sting and also a colored trace made of paint. This is much more realistic than a blank because you actually know you've been hit. During these exercises, another agent will stand in for the president while other agents will try and keep him safe. Next up is working the rope. This is said to be the most difficult part of any Secret Service agent's job. Working the rope is when a president meets a crowd. It could be at a rally or perhaps when they step off an airplane and there's a cornered off area of people to greet them. For a Secret Service agent, this is very, very stressful as you never know who could be behind the rope. You have no idea what the people in the crowd may do, and that's why they're always scanning for threats. The reason why Secret Service agents wear sunglasses is so that people can't see where their eyes are looking. But one agent said their eyes are constantly scanning hands in pockets in case someone has something in their pocket. They also look for other signs of suspicious activity from people in the crowd. And inside the crowd, there's even undercover Secret Service agents tipping off potential suspects. They wouldn't want any liquids or projectiles thrown at the president, so that's why they have to scan the crowd and make sure no one in there is dangerous. Next up is note tracking. You know how I said earlier that if someone threatens the president in a note, they will track them down and interview everyone they know? You may have thought, how exactly do they track the person down? Well, if you give a Secret Service agent a written note, they'll be able to track it right back to you. And they'll do it with something you own, which is your pen. Whenever the White House receives a troubling handwritten note, agents know how to track anyone down using the ink. The Secret Service actually work in tandem with ink manufacturers. They've got a gigantic database of ink to know exactly where it comes from. This allows them to know exactly where it's sold and where the person who wrote the note could be. This starting point is all they need, and they can track it right back to you. Next up is on camera. The worst moment for the Secret Service was in 1963 when JFK was assassinated. The investigation was full of theories, and many people do not believe the official narrative of what happened. A large part of that is because there's a lack of evidence as to what happened. The one film of the event was crucial for the Secret Service and is still used in their training today. But in the present day, the Secret Service film the president at all times. They particularly film any current presidential motorcade. That's because if there ever is an incident, they want to be able to review that in film and see where they went wrong. Recently, someone threw something at the current president in Florida. But because the motorcade was being filmed, they were able to locate that person and arrest them. It may seem a bit heavy-handed, but their sole job is to protect the President of the United States. And that's why they need to review any threat, whether it's big or small. Next up is food surveillance. If you meet the president and want to gift him some food, then it will probably be thrown in the trash. That's because every single bite of food prepared for the president is under the watchful eye of the Secret Service. The Secret Service literally stare at the White House chefs as they make the president his food. The current president actually says he has a big fear of being poisoned. And that's why he often orders fast food, as the people making it don't know who it's going to. If the Secret Service hasn't seen the food being prepared, then they don't give it to the president. Think about how easy it would be for a chef to sneak some poison into a hamburger. But if the president ever wants a pizza ordered to the White House, then it's going to take a long time. That's because to reduce the danger, they will order it to a different address and then take it to the White House. Next up is the Beast. If you want to be in the Secret Service, then you're going to have to familiarize yourself with the Beast. The Beast is the official name for the presidential limousine. The Beast is actually a custom-made, one-of-the-kind Cadillac. It's very heavily armored and is also bulletproof and blast-proof. The tires are also flat-proof. And inside the car, there's lots of areas where the president's blood is kept. It's driven by agents who have extensive knowledge of defensive driving. They can perform a 180-degree turn, as they're some of the best drivers in the world. The Beast is also not taken to a regular garage. Instead, it's serviced by Secret Service agents in a Secret Service garage. The president actually has 3 of these cars, and they all cost $2 million each. And finally on the list, we have Hotel Hell. You may think if you owned a hotel, having the president stay there would be a dream come true. After all, it would be a lot of publicity for the hotel. But that's actually not true. Hotels do not like the president or the Secret Service in their hotel. That's because every employee will have to have a thorough background check. If anyone has a criminal history in the hotel manager will tell them not to come in that day. The Secret Service also take over entire floors of the hotel, meaning other guests can't stay there. Usually the president will have one floor, and then the Secret Service will have the floor below and above the president. Also, elevators will be commandeered for their own private use, which can disrupt the hotel's business. And the Secret Service even employs an elevator repairman in case the president ever gets stuck in an elevator. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.